Hey PC gamers, and welcome back to the PC Gamer Chat Log. I am Lauren Morton, and
hey everyone, I'm Mollie Taylor.
And this week, Mollie and I are bringing back Wes Fenlon, one of our US side editors, to talk about PC ports, a word that has shifted in meaning over time as like the way that PC games transition from console to PC, or like where they begin, has changed over the years. So Wes is coming on to talk to us a bit about how that's changed over the years, and the fact that he feels like PC port as a term is something that it's almost time to retire, as so many things other than a couple holdouts are really coming to PC simultaneously. And the thing that we're talking about isn't a port to PC, it's just a PC version, and whether that is up to scratch the way that we expect it to be. So before we go bring in Wes, Mollie, what did you do last week?
Yeah, so I am well and truly back on my Final Fantasy XIV bullshit. Like,
yes,
it's the return of the Queen. I am well and truly back. I've been playing a lot of that. I'm still helping my friends. I think I spoke last week about basically having like 8 sprout toddlers to like manage and teach how to play the game. It has been very fun, very rewarding. But I also took a little bit of time out to do some end game stuff as well. So the patch that released a couple of weeks ago, there was a new, it's called like a variant dungeon, which has branching paths, and if you complete all the paths you get a mount. So a friend and I have been running that together. That's been super fun, and that has pretty much taken up most of my time. And I've also been playing a bit more of Nikke, which was the mobile game with boobs that I've been talking about. It's their anniversary, so they've done like a big event, and there is a surprisingly engaging Vampire Survivors minigame tucked away in that game right now.
For the lewd gacha game anniversary.
For the lewd gacha game anniversary, they have made a Vampire Survivors minigame, and it's not quite on the levels of Vampire Survivors, but it's still really fun. So me and my friends have also been playing an unspeakable amount of that instead of the actual game, and a bunch of people have been calling for it to like be a permanent fixture because it's really, really fun. So that's pretty much been me. Final Fantasy and waifu Vampire Survivors has been
You're going through a creature of habit phase. You're digging in your comfort for the end of the year.
Yeah, 100%. Like I had said a few weeks ago that I was trying to find like a spark to get me enjoying games again, and I think the spark was just going back to what I'm used to and just playing things that I'm comfy with. And sometimes I think you just need that. You need something that you're familiar with, that feels nice, and like you don't have to think too hard about, right? You can still enjoy games and not have to think too hard. That's kind of where I'm at the minute as we approach the end of the year. So yeah, that was me. That was my week. How about you, Lauren? What did you get up to?
Yeah, so I am continuing my cozy game warpath, which is a weird phrase to say, but into the end of the year, making sure I catch a bunch of the things that I didn't get. And I talked about a couple last week, and then this weekend I played a lot of Planet of Lana, which came out earlier this year, and I didn't make time for at the time. It's a side-scrolling puzzle platformer, sort of from the school of Limbo and Inside. I think it gets compared to that a lot because it involves a small child in perilous platforming situations, many deathly creatures. But it makes a very excellent first impression. I mean, you go through the intro sequence as you're learning the controls, and I mean, the art direction is lovely. The music that is in the background really just like, I hate overusing the word cinematic, but it has a cinematic quality in that the way the music is doing the storytelling, and like you have these like people not speaking in like I don't think any real language. I think it's all just made up as they're just like going along into like the beginning of this story where like robots come down and steal everybody in the village, and now you're on a platforming adventure with a little sidekick who you're solving puzzles with. But super pretty, super great. I'm hoping to wrap that up at some point this week because I'm like 5 hours in, and I don't think it's too much longer than that. And then I played Jusant, which just came out
Oh yeah.
last week or maybe the week prior. That one was very recent. And that's been fun as well. That's the climbing game that's done by Don't Nod, who are
Yes.
the
Life is Strange people.
thank you. Well, I don't know
Yeah.
why I can't come up with that name. Yes, the Life is Strange developers did something very different. This is a um, climbing, platforming up the like rock climbing type game, and it has the feeling of like a launch title for a console that came with like packed in new peripheral gear, and you
Oh my
have to make a
god.
game that but like in a good way. It's really enjoyable so far, but it's so very clearly an entire game about like one mechanic and one concept. Like it's about climbing, and you're like, it's gotta sell the Connect camera, or it's gotta sell the Wii wand, or it's gotta sell whatever. This whole game has to be built on this
The
one
wee
mechanic.
one.
Whatever. The Wiimote, is that what it's called?
My
A Wiimote?
favorite peripheral, the wee one.
The Wii wand. I'm absolutely certain that's what it was called. Okay, the Wii wand. Anyway, Jusant is fun. It's a lot of fun because it
Yeah.
takes something that's historically very boring in action games, where they're like, "Oh, you're going to climb up a wall," and climbing the wall involves pressing A 5 times in a row to go to the
Yeah.
next thing. And in Jusant, you have to actually like aim and like look for the different handholds of where you're going to be climbing and like try to figure out the correct path. Um, Made my trigger fingers a little sore on my controller, though, I will say, because holding on to each thing, holding on your right hand, and then you steer, and
Yeah.
then you hold your left hand, and then you back and forth like you are climbing. And I'm like, I feel the carpal tunnel setting in a little bit, but it's really fun so far. I'm like 2 hours into that before I arrived at a puzzle that I briefly got stuck at, and it was like the middle of the day on a Saturday, and I was like, I'm gonna go touch grass, and come back to this after my brain is rested. So that's been my experience with Jusant so far. A game that doesn't use the Wii wand notoriously. You have
No.
to. I would recommend using a controller. I don't remember if they recommend you use a controller, but I do. I didn't try it on keyboard, but
It feels like it would make more sense on a controller, to be
I
fair.
just complained about my fingers getting sore, and I literally didn't try it on the keyboard. But look, I feel like it makes sense on a controller. Anyway,
Yeah.
cool. Well, then on that note, let's go get Wes and let's talk about PC ports, things that are supposed to work well on keyboard and mouse, ideally. So we will be right back with him. Hey, Wes, thanks for coming back to join Mollie and I. And we are talking this week about the concept of PC ports, which is a concept that has kind of changed over the last, I don't know, 20 years, as you have recently written about on the site. What made you wind up deciding to write about it, which is then kind of the reason we dragged you on to talk about it here too.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me back on. Always a pleasure. I can't take too much credit for the genesis of writing about this topic. I've written about PC ports in the past, but this particular angle on them, sort of looking at where we are now in relation to, I was kind of focused mostly on like the Xbox 360 and PS3 era. So, 2005 to 2010, primarily. This was an idea that Evan, our editor in chief, had, kind of just like sitting around in Asana, which is what we use to track all the stuff we actually put on the site and the many, many hundreds of ideas that we think about putting on the site at some point, but have never gotten around to. He kind of had this idea of asking, where are we now in relation to how dire it used to be a PC gamer and want to play games that were on consoles, because even if we got them on PC, there was no guarantee that it was going to be a version of that game that you wanted to play. So I started with that idea as the genesis point, and then kind of thought about what games that I've personally experienced that would kind of fit into that story, and how to give an overview that didn't feel, like just a completely boring history lesson, basically. Come at it with a bit of an angle, and that's where we ended up.
Yeah, if you want to read Wes's thoughts about this on the site, it's with only a few holdouts left. We're so close to everything launching on PC. It's almost time to retire the phrase PC port. And then I know you try not to do a history lesson, but I do actually kind of like a history lesson, because Like
It's a little bit of a history lesson.
there's just the small handful of years between you and me, Wes, because of the way that gaming and tech both developed during those particular years. Is like it's an important 4 or 5 years between you and me. 4, I think it's like 4. Anyway, we won't get into how old people are.
No, let's spend the whole time just spiraling into depression.
We'll just say,
I'm
Mollie,
fine.
what do you remember?
Yeah, so I think for me, like when I was growing up anyway, especially with the games that I engaged in, it was the games where like the PC port was just a totally different game,
Mhm.
right? So many times it was just not the same game that was on a console or on like a handheld, because I was growing up when like the licensed games were super popular, like your Madagascars, your Bratz, your Barbies, you're like Harry Potters, your DreamWorks, like Warner Brothers movies looking ass turning into random video games to make a few extra bucks, right? When THQ was thriving off of all of these ports, they all of these like adaptations they were making. That's when I grew up.
The
So I think in
excitement
my head,
just turned to ash in my mouth when you said licensed games, and I'm like, she's gonna say Lion King, she's gonna say Aladdin, and then Madagascar comes out, and I'm like, oh, my heart.
See, Lion King for me, Wes. Like we fall on either sides of some of these things. Yes.
Go ahead and finish your point, Molly.
I do remember watching the VHS tapes that like advertised that like the Lion King game, and there was another one as well, maybe like Aladdin. I think it was. It may have been. I do remember like having VHS tapes that advertised those, but I didn't play them on PC. But yeah, so that was like my perception of what a port was back. I think like a port back then and a port now are two very different things, right? But that was my experience with it.
Yeah,
back then
there was really that long tradition of those of many types of games being released for, even you had a weird period where like there's a PlayStation version, and then there's also a Dreamcast version that might be a different game than the PlayStation version. And then of course there's going to be like a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance version. That's definitely a totally different game, right? So you could sometimes have 3 completely different games that were just slapped on the name Madagascar or Aladdin, or even in some non-licensed game cases like the Rayman series. I think Rayman 2 maybe had 2 or 3 different versions that Ubisoft made for different platforms. And that was really confusing when you're a kid who maybe doesn't have, the wherewithal to go online and like find the game facts board where people are talking about these games. And you're just like, oh, I love this thing. And like, you might buy the really shitty one, or you might buy the one that's like actually a good game. You never know.
I don't remember like encountering this problem until a little bit later, until like the 2010s era, I think, because when I was younger, like you, Molly, I kind of remember separating in my head like games that were console games versus like games that were PC games. Like, I was fortunate that I had a console at home, but I also had a family computer, back in the era of family computer in the living room, only 90 kids remember, hashtag. So like, the edutainment games from the library were on the family computer. The Sims was on the computer. Like the weird drawing apps, the like Photoshop for kids. It was like Pixar. Anyway, that wasn't a game. That was just like a fun thing on the computer. That was on the computer. But then like every Nintendo game, PlayStation game, whatever, that was on a console. And so I don't really think I started experiencing the travesty of PC ports until sort of like the mid-era that you described when you originally wrote about this, Wes, of like some things being simultaneous and other things lagging behind.
Yeah, and this was a really common thing in licensed games earlier on, but then there were other games too that there would be a substantially different version on PC. One of the ones I think I mentioned in my article was Ubisoft's Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, which everybody just called GRAW, was like a big deal on the Xbox 360, but the PC version, it played really differently. For one thing, it like didn't have some of the graphical stuff that the 360 had, and then it also was like they kind of made it more like the old Rainbow Six game. So it had this more like tactical kind of overhead view, I think, or like you could do some kind of tactical stuff that in the 360 version was a bit more like shooter forward. It was more of that like third person shooter just as that era was beginning. So there was kind of a weird time. I mean, Dragon Age Origins, right? Like one of your favorites, Lauren, is a pretty different game if you play it on PC versus console.
And tragically, I did play that on an Xbox 360 originally.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us did. And one of the things I tried to get into in the article is like one of the reasons why I think we kind of call everything a port these days, or like by habit, is that during that period, especially, the consoles were really the dominant like thing driving video game discourse, video game play, video game evolution. I think after the early 2000s, when we had games like Deus Ex, which were really significant on the PC, there were still great games on PC. There were games that were a big deal, but it was sort of like the Sims platform for a few years, I think, while like a lot of the money, the marketing, the hype was all going into the console space. And so you would get games that would prioritize Xbox 360 is our lead platform. Like you would always see people online talking like, what was the lead platform for this game? Because you wanted to get, if you got it on 360 or PS3, like sometimes the PS3 version really did not run very well compared to the 360 version. Occasionally it went the other way around, not as common, right? And then the PC was probably an afterthought port that either came a year later, or even if it came out at the same time, you never know if it was going to run very well, if it was going to take advantage of your graphics card, that kind of thing. So it was a dark time for sure for PC gamers.
Yeah, as far as like, go ahead, Molly.
I was just going to say, this is totally unrelated. Was Graw the one where on the Xbox 360 you could use the camera to like take a picture of your face and it would like put your face onto the soldier and it was terrifying? It was so
I believe that was the thing. You would use the Uno camera, right? The camera that people only use to play Uno on Xbox
the
Live.
Uno camera. Yeah. Was that feature on PC? Could you like use a webcam to take a picture of your face?
I do not know. I doubt it. I feel like that was them taking advantage of that specific thing. But I mean, it would seem weird for them to leave that out because way more people would have a PC webcam than a Xbox webcam. But I don't know. I have to look it up.
Sorry, that's my only frame of reference for that game because we had the Uno cam, so that's my only frame of reference. I mean, I'm so sorry.
It must have been like a postage stamp, resolution picture, right? Like really low res,
20 by 20 pixels.
It was very like uncanny valley. It was so bizarre.
That's all the pixels you need for a human face.
007 resolution face textures.
Yes.
Like for those that don't remember that era, Wes, like as you said, we keep using the word PC port, but from pre 2010, what did PC port mean in terms of like timeline and like features versus what we're talking about now, which, as you say, is a habit, and we're not really talking about the same thing anymore.
Yeah, and it can still happen this way, but I think back then it was much more common especially for the big games, to just come out on one platform first, or maybe both consoles, and then I'm not even including like Nintendo in this part of the conversation, because they, in the GameCube era, up to 2005, they did kind of have their own. Or they were like at some degree of parity, right? There'd be PS2 games, Xbox games, GameCube games that come out on everything at the same time. But after that, the Wii was kind of off in its own little universe, where if it got a version of a game, it was like we were talking about before, it was a totally different version of a game, right? With the 360 and PS3, a game would come out, and then maybe 6 months later, maybe a year later, or maybe never would it show up on PC. Some like big series like Halo got a version of Halo 2 on Windows Vista. They like hyped it up as a DirectX 10, I think, Vista exclusive. That was like a couple years after launch. The Gears of War games, Gears 1 got quite a good PC port, and Epic was up until that point a PC developer primarily, and then they made Gears and it was so popular on 360. Eventually they did a port like a year later and, included all of the bells and whistles that they could on it at the time. So it was definitely a better version of that game, but I don't think it sold very much, because at that time, if you were interested in a game like Gears of War, you had an Xbox 360. It might have broken because of the red ring thing, but like you definitely had a 360 to play those kind of games. So I think that was the trend. There were, even Mass Effect, right? Like BioWare was a PC developer, and then Mass Effect came to PC like a year after it came to console or so. So a lot of these games, it just took a while for them to show up on PC. And I think it really wasn't until we kind of made it further into the 2010s and some things started making the PC the more popular destination for games that this started to turn around a little bit. I would credit a lot of this to MOBAs, honestly, to MOBAs and to Counter-Strike, things that kind of made the PC like the default platform that a lot of people wanted to play on. And PCs were getting cheaper, and you could also all of a sudden play a lot of games on like a laptop that didn't even have, had like a really wimpy graphics card in it, right? Like League of Legends, you could play that on, pretty much any system. And that was certainly a choice that they made, right? They wanted as many people as possible to be able to play that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think I definitely agree with you when you say like that sort of 05 to 2010 era really was like a dark period of PC gaming, because that I distinctly remember like that is when I moved away from PC gaming, because before then I kind of used to do the two in harmony, right? Like I had a console and, like you said, Lauren, there was like the family PC, right? And I would kind of use those two in tandem with each other. Like I had my games that I played on PC, and then I had my games that I played on console. And then when the 360 came along, I just sort of did not engage with the PC side of like my hobby anymore for like a good, I want to say like at least like 7 years, like 6-7 years. That little like dark era, I just did not engage with PC or PC gaming at all, because like you said, it was so console forward. And then I think you're right, MOBAs definitely helped. Me and Lauren spoke in a previous episode as well about like battle royales are a very like PC gaming ass like genre as well, and I think that it's all like the tactical shooty kind of stuff, I think, that brought people back.
And MOBAs, Minecraft, FPS games.
Yes.
Minecraft is a huge component of it, right? And like now you can play Minecraft on literally anything, like if you pull like a jacket out of your closet, like if it's probably got Minecraft on it. But in the, back then too, like I think there were several things that sort of like made this like a vicious cycle where even if a game did come to PC, it was late, or it came to PC and it was busted. Like GTA 4, one of the biggest games of that generation, the PC version is like still kind of hard to run, I think. Like if you have a powerful PC now, it'll run fine, but it had like a lot of physics and like effects that were kind of based around the console and just like always were really janky on PC. The original Dead Space, fantastic game that has now been remade, but the original game had like some weird frame rate issues where it was built to be run at 30 FPS, and if you ran at a different FPS, things got all wonky on PC. Saints Row 2 was like a famously just completely jacked up PC port, really bad. One other one I mentioned in the article is we have like a list of like the worst PC ports ever, and we called a few games the holy trinity of dog shit Capcom ports, which was Resident Evil 4, DMC3, and Onimusha 3. Great games, not great games on PC. And then you had like Xbox or Microsoft doing the Games for Windows Live thing, which
I
is
was going to mention this. Yeah.
like you can talk about that if you want. That was a disaster.
Now, because I was going to say, did GTA 4 get released from the Games for Windows Live shackles? Because wasn't that a Games for Windows Live?
It was. I think finally it has been, but obviously many, many years late.
I was going to say, because I cannot recall a single game that like was a Games for Windows Live game that ran well for me. I remember I bought Viva Pinata. That was back when that was available. We always talk about Viva Pinata. I'm so sorry.
Very cool games, though.
It's such a cool game. And I remember buying it on PC back when Games for Windows Live was still a thing. And I just remember it ran like ass. Like it ran so bad. It might have just been that my PC was bad, but I've just never had a good experience with games for Windows Live, which is a terrible
The name
name
just
anyway,
rolls right off the tongue, right?
Yeah, it's so catchy.
Yeah, so even if you got a game on PC, like you would have that monkey's paw moment, right? Of like, oh, this Xbox 360 game I really want to play is on PC, and then it's fucking Games for Windows Live. Okay, do I even want it now?
We mostly get simultaneous releases at this point, as you've pointed out, Wes. What is the last actually bad either PC version or like PC port that you guys remember playing? I mean, I guess we've had stuff even this year for both of you guys, right? Or at least recently.
Yeah, if we're not talking about, if we're not trying to kind of make that like, is it a port or is it just a version of the game that was now made for everything at the same time delineation? Like I reviewed Wild Hearts earlier this year, and it clearly had like some serious like CPU struggles where this game was, it was like a nice looking game. And the monsters is kind of a Monster Hunter clone style game. It looked fine. The monsters were fairly detailed and like had a lot of animation going on, but it wasn't a hyper dense game. Like it didn't have tons of enemies on screen, not tons of like AI stuff to deal with. And like clearly it was just being capped by my CPU, what kind of frame rate it could hit. And I could tell while reviewing it, like this game is not running anywhere near as well as it should be able to. And sure enough, they've done many, many months of patches after the fact to like kind of like bring it up to the performance level it should be at. And, that's the kind of game that you want to run really, really well. Those hunting games, like you want at least a solid 60 FPS, right? And like even on high end hardware, it was struggling to hit that for people. So that was a disappointing one. I'll give one more, which is years ago, there was a port of Little King's Story to PC. That was a Wii game that I don't know if either of you ever played, but it was sort of like a weird, it was sort of like a console version of a real-time strategy game where you would use the Wii pointer to move around your little king, and you would have, it's kind of Pikmin-esque, like it's a bit in that vein, where you've got your little king and then you'd have your followers and you would point them at sort of puzzly things and send them to go build something or send them to take something apart or mine a resource or whatever. It was a cute little game, but it was one of those games that was a small Japanese game. They tried to bring it to Steam, and trying to implement things like mouse controls from a game that was built for console was definitely beyond the porting team that worked on that. And it was not a very functional video game when they put it out. And PC modder Durante, who's famous for fixing the original Dark Souls, among other games, actually like got in touch with the people making that port and helped them make it significantly better. I don't think could overcome all of the issues, but like made it a much more playable game, which is good because it's kind of a hidden gem.
I should play that. I should try that. I think
you'd like it.
I think I would like it. Like the way you explained it, it sounds very good. But I think you've like kind of you mentioned it, that it was like a Japanese developer, right? And not to point fingers, because we don't do that here, but I think definitely a lot of prominent Japanese developers have just really struggled to put out good PC ports, right? Like you called it like the dog shit trilogy of Capcom games or something, like Capcom game. That Capcom is like so much better for PC ports now. Like I think Resident Evil 8 ran pretty well on PC, apart from the stuttering issue, which was like people said might or might not be Denuva, I think, right? But like Monster Hunter runs pretty well now on PC. Resident Evil runs pretty decently on PC. It's like the Team Ninja games and the Square Enix games. Like for me, the last like actual port that I remember playing and being like, oof, was I tried to do a replay of Final Fantasy 13. And I never played it on PC before. I played it on Xbox 360 and PS3. So I was like, I may as well finish. I may as well finish the platform trinity and play it on PC as well. And it just does not run well on PC.
Mm.
And I think
And
Square Enix is like
that's an old
very
game
notorious.
too.
Yeah, it's like 2009 it came out on console, I think, and I think it was like a few years later for PC. It's like that game does not run well. I feel like Square Enix is definitely one of the biggest offenders when it comes to shitty PC ports. And like I think because just by nature of how a lot of people play games in Japan as well, right? Like PC was never a super considered thing, I guess, in the same way that I think back in the PS3 360 era, I don't think 360 was taken into consideration a lot either because nobody played
Right.
Xbox 360 in Japan. So yeah, like actual port, Final Fantasy 13 did not run well, which was a bummer. It was playable, but just not great. But then another Square Enix special, albeit their Western development unit rather than the Japanese developers, was Forspoken. I had an awful time playing Forspoken this year.
Mm-hmm.
That game did not run well on my PC. I think it was like an issue to do with graphics cards that had like less than a certain amount of VRAM.
Right.
Yeah, I have like a 370, which is like 8 GB of VRAM, and it did not like it at all. It ran terribly. I spent maybe the first like 8 hours of me actually playing that game just constantly tweaking with settings, and then it would work. And then I would come back to it the next day and it just wouldn't work. Like the settings I had picked wouldn't work, and I would have to like fiddle with it again to get it working. It was just such a frustrating situation, especially because I was reviewing it as well, right? So when you're trying to review something and you spend half of your time battling with graphic settings,
Really
very, very
enamors you to that
frustrating.
game, right?
Hmm?
Really enamors you to that game.
Oh,
Yeah.
it made me love it. It made me love it so much. It's like I genuinely think I would have enjoyed it more if I was not having to like mess around with settings and have my game drop to like 10 FPS every single time I was trying to do something.
Yeah, not to like keep dishing on Square Enix, but I remember the early Final Fantasy game versions that came out for PC. What I think in the middle of last year they were like releasing them, and I think at least some of them, if not all, were like the mobile versions that they had released for those games at some point that they then retooled again for PC. I'm going to admit I didn't play any of them. I don't know if either of you two did, but I remember there being a lot of conversations about those coming in not great.
I don't remember if that was the Pixel remasters or if that was the previous time they might have released those games. I forget which way it was.
The Pixel remasters is what I'm thinking of.
But they have definitely released poor versions of the classic Final Fantasy games at some point, if not already at more than one point. Yeah.
Yes, but the 7 remake did not release in a great state on PC, right? Was it just that it didn't run well, or was it like limited options?
It ran okay, other than it had some like the performance requirements were quite minimal because it was, a PS4 era game. But it had some really bad stutter issues, and it also just had like the basic out of the box like Unreal Engine graphics options, like high, medium, low for like 6 things, and like that was basically it. It was like a very like, this is a graphical showcase game, even if it had come from an older gen console. Like, it's a really nice looking game. And years ago when they did Final Fantasy 15, that was a PC port that took them like 18 months to put out. But when they did put it out, it like really took advantage of PC hardware, had like tons of, bells and whistles, like all the options you would want. You could really tweak the hell out of it. And then to see them just like dump Final Fantasy 7 on the Epic Store as an Epic exclusive with like bad stutter out of the box and no options. Just it's like, what are you guys doing? This is like your big game, and you're just kind of just shoving it out the door without calling attention to it, without putting the effort into it. That was a big disappointment for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the thing with Square Enix, I think, especially is a very odd publisher in this way, and that they'll do they're so big that you kind of don't know what you're going to get, because sometimes they'll put out a version of one of these games that's actually really good on PC, and then sometimes you get the one that just was sort of just dumped, off the back of the truck and like not given any attention. I don't know why they don't have a more consistent standard across the board, other than I guess when you're a very big company and you know that most of your sales are going to be on the PlayStation, it's not organizationally efficient to put a ton of effort into making your PC versions all good, I guess, but it's a real shame.
Yeah, so the Final Fantasy series remains one of those holdouts on things that often get delayed versions, like potentially significantly worse PC versions. What other series do we have that are still holdouts in this day and age that either are or are not surprising? If it's Square Enix, I guess we're not surprised, but
It's
yeah,
becoming less and
besides
less
that.
common, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you've got like the obvious ones, like Nintendo's not bringing their games to PC. And
sure.
then Sony now is, and most of the time, I think it's probably like a 2-year wait or so. But I feel like some of these games have been coming to PC a bit faster than others, like Returnal from the PS5
Oh yeah.
came relatively quickly. It's probably going to vary based on how much they think it's what the long tail of sales is on the console. But even, I mean, some other ones, like I was just talking about Wolong, or no, I was talking about Wild Hearts, but Wolong was the other game that Team Ninja put out this year. I believe both of those were day and date PC, and that's a big change from when they were doing the Neo games just a few years ago, where those were pretty delayed. So yeah, what other ones do you guys have noted down?
Well, you mentioned Neo. That's maybe one of the last pretty bad ports, because I reviewed the original Neo for us. Oh man, that was awful. I think the keyboard and mouse control support almost literally did not work. I can't even remember how many issues there were with it. If it's in our review for it, it is archived to time there. The issues that I had with playing a keyboard and mouse on the original Neo.
You've
On the
suppressed
PC
your
version.
memories of that experience, it sounds like.
I really did. There are times I forget that I reviewed that game, but man, now that you mention it, I'm like, yep, that was pretty terrible. The other one that comes to mind is like that Dreams on
Oh,
that sort of game creation game that they
I
have
forgot that
on
came
PlayStation.
to PC.
No, it hasn't. That's the
I was gonna
thing. It
say,
has not yet. That's one of the holdouts that is still remaining. Like, is that ever going to come to PC? I know people would
I
like it
don't think
to,
it
but
will.
yeah, we have so many other creation type things on PC. I don't know. I don't know if it would do well. I just remember that brief rush of everybody posting their dreams creations on social
It
media.
was
Mm-hmm.
it was that time as well. It was the great pandemic times, if I remember.
Was
Like,
it? Yeah, it must have been.
I think it came out just before, or
In
like,
2019. Yeah.
yeah, I think it might have been like a 2019 game. And because I remember like when COVID happened, I remember a lot more like creations appearing. Yeah, that's a good one. And I do want to say, because you were saying about Neo and like not being a good port, Team Ninja and like Japanese developers in general have been getting a lot better
For
at
sure.
porting their games over as well. Like, I think there's that recognition now that there's such a big market for it, right? And there was a time where you just couldn't really play like a good JRPG on PC, right? It was
Yeah.
it was the biggest reason why I was so console forward for such a long time, because that's where my genre was. And then, the ports weren't great when they first started coming, but I will say in the last like couple of years, there's been like a noticeable improvement, especially with like fighting games as well. Like, there's been a big improvement in fighting game ports on PC as well. Street Fighter 6, aside from the story mode, which runs kind of poopy, like the actual game itself runs really well on PC. Like Tekken 8, I played the closed network test for Tekken 8 a few months ago on PC, and that ran on my PC anyway. It ran really nicely. There was a couple of issues, but nothing super terrible, and it runs a lot better than Tekken 7 does anyway. So like that is something that is being improved upon as well. But yeah, so big shout out to to developers paying attention to PC now. But I think for holdouts, for me, I don't know what happened with like Fable Anniversary. and Fable 3 coming out on PC, and then Fable 2 just never making an appearance. I don't know why. It's the best Fable. It's so good. And they just never put it on PC. It's not happening. I know it's not happening. But I wish that it was on PC.
I mean, I could see them doing a Fable 2 remaster or remake, with the new game probably a couple years away. I could see that popping up at some point, Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope.
I want it to, so because sometimes I just get that like little hankering to replay it, right? I'm like, oh my god, it's been so long since I played Fable 2. I don't own a 360. I don't own like an Xbox One or anything, so I can't. I own a copy of it. I just don't own anything to play it on, right? So I'm like, oh, I really wish that Fable 2 was on PC because it's one of my favorite games, and it's always sad when you get that little like nostalgia pang and you can't do anything about it.
If only your PC had a disk drive, you could just put it in and just sort of pretend, just sit there and pretend you're playing Fable 2.
Listen to it spin. The couple holdouts that I have left are definitely more PlayStation kids. Like that game company's games, like Journey took a long time to come to PC, and I've talked plenty about Sky Children of the Light lately, so I won't do it again, but that's on every platform except for PC, and we're waiting on PC. And then Team Eco, or Ico, I don't remember how we're supposed to pronounce it, but Shadow of the Colossus didn't come to PC until it was for the remaster, I believe, is when that happened. And then The Last Guardian.
It's not on PC, Shadow of the Colossus.
Yes, it is.
Is it not?
I don't think so. Is it?
Yes, it is. Wes, I swear. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to look us up.
I'm pretty sure you made that up.
Insane. No, I promise you. I apologize.
I'll put $5 on it right now that's not on PC.
Did it just get a remaster and it was never on PC?
It did. It did get a remake even on PS4.
Okay.
Yeah, I think PS4 and PS5 the remake.
That was a Blue Point. Yeah.
You're right. It's not. Special. What the heck? Okay. I don't know why I decided that had come out on PC with a remaster. Okay.
Lauren, you're right to want it. $5 over, like, right now.
Okay. Shadow of the Colossus never came to PC, famously. Everybody remembers that. Also.
Yeah.
Including Lauren. Yeah, everyone knows that.
But The Last Guardian also never came to PC, much newer. Yeah. Yeah, so that is another one, because I do love Shadow of the Colossus, and apparently decided that I had played it recently, which is not accurate. That's not a thing.
Listen, we have to think about so many games on a daily basis. I convinced myself Dreams was on PC. You convinced yourself Shadow of the Colossus was on PC.
Did I dust off my PlayStation 4 when it got a remaster? Is that what happened? Was that the last time I pulled out my PS4, and that's why I've played it recently? That must have been it. That's wild. Anyway, Any other like big holdout series that we're waiting for?
That's a good question, because I think when they put the Kingdom Hearts collection on PC, that was it for me. That was like my big like final holdout that just hadn't made it over. So when it came to PC, I was like, cool. There are definitely like little games here and there. Like I wish some like older console games would come over, like some late PS2 era, early PS3 era games would make their way over. I'm very much hoping that the Lollipop Chainsaw remaster makes it to PC, because I have a soft spot for that game. How
about Shadows of the Damned? Like same developers, wildly different tone than Lollipop Chainsaw.
I have not played it. I have not played Shadows. Is it good?
I haven't played it either. I've been waiting to play the PC version. I think it's not as good as it should be. It's Shinji Mikami and Suda51 teaming up to make a game, but then EA sort of infamously controlled how that game took shape and didn't let like two of the best Japanese creators just like go wild with it. So it's probably like a 7 that should be a 9,
Like a muzzled version of what could have been.
Yeah, for me, like, PC, the PC port phrasing is never going to truly go away, because there are always going to be these older games still getting brought up. It's really just kind of talking about contemporary stuff where it becomes less and less relevant. So, I mean, I could list off like so many great retro games that I hope show up on Steam someday. I think a big holdout, well, it's weird to even call it a holdout, but like a game that I would love to see brought back is Panzer Dragoon Saga, which belongs to this sort of rare pantheon of games from like the late 90s where everyone talked about them so breathlessly, partially because they were great games, but largely because they made like 50 copies of them for the West, and nobody had actually played these games. They'd only read about them in magazines like Electronic Gaming Monthly or talked about them online. And so they took on this very mythical status, right? Panzer Dragoon Saga was one, Suikoden 2 was another one, and Suikoden is actually getting like the remastered treatment from Konami and coming out on PC. I think it got delayed, but it's like early next year maybe. And so that's like a big one to have that series pop up on PC. Panzer Dragoon Saga, really weird, interesting RPG from the Sega Saturn that Sega has supposedly lost the source code for. That's the story. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not. But porting a Saturn game to the PC would be quite a big job. It's a weird system. So that would have to be like, a real like recovery job from some studio, like a Digital Eclipse or somebody like that, or a Night Dive. But that's one I kind of hope shows up someday, because it would be cool to just have it safe on a platform that will exist forever when Sega Saturns are going to become rare beasts at some point in the future.
My weird deep cut is this game called Radiata Stories that I've brought up once on this podcast before. It might have even been when the three of us were talking about some other topic. I have a PS2 copy shoved in like a drawer and the PlayStation 2 to play it on, but I really don't want to dust off the PlayStation 2 to replay this game that I don't remember if it was any good. Look, this is not a recommendation for Radiata Stories. It's just one of those things in my drawer that I'm like, I'd like to finish that game because I know I started it 10 times as a child, and like never completed it. But then the other thing is, I would love to see Fire Emblem eventually show up on PC. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Great fit for it.
It is a great fit for it. That like very, I don't know. I don't want to say quintessentially like console series because like I don't know, why is it? It shouldn't be. Because
Nintendo have their little mittens on it.
Yeah, Mollie, you were theorizing like if any Nintendo games ever got ported, what would be the big request? And like, there's an elephant in the room of the modern day for sure. Other than Fire Emblem, what would it be, Mollie?
I mean, to be honest, I would also like to see Fire Emblem because I did suggest that people would probably say like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, right? But I think I would also really love to see a Fire Emblem game because I haven't played a Fire Emblem game because I just do not touch my Switch. Yeah. My Switch and my 3DS are like locked away and they rarely come out. And I always wanted to play Three Houses. That was the one that everyone went wild for. That was the one everyone was like raving about. And I really want to play it and I still haven't.
It's okay.
So I would want that on PC.
It's okay.
It's just okay.
It's just okay. There's much.
No one else says that word.
I love Fire Emblem. There's much better Fire Emblem out there. That game is really bloated. It's really bloated. It's got good stuff in it, but it's bloated. Like I would play one of the handheld ones, but still a good game. Damn. Yeah. But there's so many Fire Emblems to pick from. I mean, I love the old GBA ones, which are way simpler. But if you want the version that brings all that character stuff in, all the relationship stuff, like Awakening is still the best that they've done.
Awakening is the other one I hear a lot about.
Yeah, that's the one to play. And then every other one you play after that, you're like, oh, I can see them trying to justify doing the same stuff they did in Awakening with some plot contrivance that like doesn't land nearly as well, or just feels really shoehorned in, or just like the main plot stuff isn't as good. The writing in that game is also quite excellent. Like the character writing. I think that was an 8.4 joint. They're a small localization studio in Japan that just does really good work. So I love Awakening. I would stand that one. Will never come to PC, but it would be great if it
did. It would be nice.
You need a 3DS.
Nice. I think it would actually be remiss kind of moving away from Nintendo, but just obviously still thinking about ports, because ports are better now, like, or PC versions, PC ports are a lot better than they used to be. Do you think there was like a turning point? Because I can't believe we haven't mentioned the the PC port that I remember just did not, like, it was like filled my news box. Everyone was talking about it. It was Batman Arkham Knight on PC.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
Oh.
everyone popped the fuck off when that PC port came out. I wasn't even really playing PC at that point when that game came out. That was like, what, 2015? I wasn't really playing much PC, but I just remember, like, I could not escape the news about that port. Like, I wouldn't call that the turning point, but I definitely think that was like that sparked a big conversation about
Mm-hmm.
the quality of PC ports, I feel like.
I think one of the big things that's changed between now and then is at that point, the average, maybe not the average PC, but like if you were a PC gaming enthusiast, you probably had at least a mid-range graphics card, and that even a lower end or a mid-range graphics card and your CPU were way more powerful than the console hardware at the time. So I think a big part of it was like Arkham Knight was a messy bad port that kind of couldn't run on anything. It was a very demanding game, and people's expectations for what their PC hardware should be able to do at that point were it should be able to run pretty much any console game like to the max. And that has been this new console generation, I think, has been a big, like, rude awakening for a lot of people, where the baseline for the consoles has come up so much that
Yeah.
now, even though PC hardware is more powerful, it's like the gap is a lot smaller than it used to be.
I
And
agree, yeah.
the ways in which the hardware is similar and different can cause some major issues, right? Like you were talking about Forspoken not being happy with 8 GB VRAM graphics cards, and the way the consoles are architected now, they have this like shared pool of memory that goes to like system and graphics card. If you're kind of designing around that in mind, you've got a lot of memory to play with for your game. And then if you come over to PC, some of the graphics cards have 12, 16 gigabytes of VRAM. A lot of them have 8, right? If it's an older card, or if it's like a slightly lower end card. And if you're not building your game in a way to be conscious of that, that can cause a lot of issues. So I don't remember exactly, excuse me, what was wrong with Arkham Knight, other than a lot of stuff. But I think, but yeah, that was definitely the point where a big point where people were looking at like a high performance game and being like, no, my PC should be able to run this. And I think that expectation at the time was probably pretty fair. Now it gets into a lot more questionable territory, where I think we just got very used to, during that generation, PC hardware being way stronger. And now like developers having to do a lot more specific work to make a version of the game that runs well on console as well as on PC, even though we're kind of closer to parity. Some of those differences like make a big impact, and that's where we get our stutter problems and other issues, performance issues on PC.
Yeah, like as you're starting to talk about like current day and the future, Wes, like in your opinion, what are the issues with PC versions? Whether even if we get them simultaneously, we're still going to have PC version problems. What are we going to be dealing with for the next, like, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, like the near future of PC port
Hopefully
woes?
not for the next 3 to 5 years, and this stuff will get way better. We'll see. I mean, the big boogeyman right now is shader compilation stutter. You will hear people talking about that all over the place, and that's basically because on consoles you can precompile shaders because you know exactly what that hardware is, right? You cannot precompile shaders for a PC game because there are 10 billion different PC configurations between graphics cards, CPUs, etc., RAM. So they have to be able to do that on the fly or cache shaders when you first load up the game, which I think, to developers' credits, like more games are taking that step of making you wait a few minutes up front, but that makes for a smoother experience while you play. Epic has specifically targeted this issue with a newer version of Unreal Engine 5. I think it's 5.1 or 5.2, something like that, where they're saying like we are going after, they call it pipeline state object creation, a lot of like technical mumbo jumbo, but basically they came up with a way to more effectively automatically cache that stuff so that it should hopefully just happen in the background, and you won't have that stutter when you use a new magical effect that has a particle attached to it, or you encounter a new enemy type or a new environment or whatever. So hopefully that's like a diminishing issue, but we'll see. That requires games to be on the newest version of Unreal Engine, if that's the engine they're using. If you're making a game for 4 or 5 years, you don't just upgrade to the newest version of that engine, because that could break a lot of shit, right? Like that's a big choice to make. So we're still going to see games coming out that have been in the works for a few years that maybe still struggle with these issues. And obviously not everything is made on Unreal, right? There's also traversal stutter, which people will confuse these two things because it's often hard to tell what's going on, but that's like you're just walking into a new area or even within an environment, and the game is just like little hitches, right? Which are very annoying. They don't totally break the experience. That's kind of just on developers, I think, to design the way the game loads efficiently, but maybe it's something we'll be able to kind of brute force with faster SSDs. A lot of people are now moving on to the PCIe Gen 4 or even Gen 5 drives. There's this standard that Microsoft has made for Windows called direct storage, which is just like a way faster access for a game to the SSD that Forspoken had. Was actually the first game, I think, to launch with direct storage. Didn't make a huge difference in the case of Forspoken.
No.
So I think that's sort of instructive, right? It's like these are tools that games can use to bypass these problems, but it's not like it's not a silver bullet, right? It's not just a like tick the direct storage box and game run good now, right? Like it's a possibility, but it depends on the user's hardware, depends on how the game implements it, how the game is built. So I'm hoping that faster SSDs will help, with some issues, but we're still going to see games that have these stutter issues. We're still going to see games that are designed for 30 FPS on console because they really want to push ray tracing or something. And, it will be an eternal struggle, but hopefully we're kind of at the low point now, and the amount of attention people are paying to this stuff and the noise that they're making. And we'll have a new generation of PC graphics cards within the next year or so, and CPUs that will start inching us past the consoles a bit more, that, maybe to some degree we can kind of just brute force our way out of this problem, which costs money. But if you're willing to, spend $1,000 on a new graphics card, some games are going to start running better probably.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to be better than console people. I just want to be equal. I don't want to buy a game on PC and be like, oh, I should have bought this on PS5.
That is a big frustration.
It runs way better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we are going to start seeing things improve in some of those ways, and maybe some of our wish list games will start showing up on PC. We'll see. Yeah, big crossed fingers energy over here. Thank you, Wes, for having the forethought to go ahead and write about this topic while Mollie and I had it in our back topic, and we were just waiting to snatch you to talk about it for a while. Thanks for bringing both of you, your history of good and bad ports.
No problem. PC. We got to figure out what word to use instead of ports. If it becomes a thing where just all of these games are on PC day one and we're PC lead platform, version just doesn't quite have
roll off.
It doesn't.
It's so dry.
It's so dry. Yeah. So I don't know what the word is.
We're just going to start calling the console versions console ports. You have PC and then you have console ports. We'll just plug it.
Yes.
Plug it right on them and it'll be fine.
Just Uno reverse. They're console ports now.
Nailed
Deal with it. Beautiful. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.